pavilion, but the last 2 years, this has turned into a showcase that people need to see. Your outreach, for you in the uniform, it's critical for you to do the outreach to this industrial base that's here. It's really important. So we try to get leaders to support this, not just here, but the other services as well when we do different events. I'm going to move on because we only have 30 minutes for our first session. And I want to welcome the first session today. We're honored to host Colonel Derek Lane, USMC. He's the commanding officer of the Marine Corps Communication Electronics School located at the Marine Combat Center, 29 Palms. The mission of the school is to train Marines in ground electronics maintenance, tactical communications, and air control and anti-air warfare operations, and maintenance in order to ensure that all that works and the commanders get their command and control stuff on time, on target, and what's needed. And many people don't realize the size and scope of what that communication school is, and you're going to hear a little bit about that here in just a minute. Prior to this assignment, Colonel Lane was the Assistant Chief of Staff at G6 Marine Forces Central Command. He's also been the commanding officer of 8th Communication Battalion and a host of other important billets within the Marine Corps to grow him to where he is today. So without further ado, let's welcome Colonel Derek Lane to the stage.
Okay, so as Colonel Warwick said, I'm Derek Lane, CEO of AFCEA. Got there late June of last summer, and on the heels of my arrival, the Commandant issued his Commandant's planning guidance. And I will assume that each of you have probably read that. And one of his primary tenets is focusing on training and education of our Marines. And if you heard him speak this morning, there's nothing that he spoke about that isn't enabled by a commander's ability to command and control his or her assigned forces. And that's what essentially we do at AFCEA is we train the Marines that enable them to have commander's ability to command and control. And so part of what the Commandant tasked in his planning guidance was for his training and education command apparatus to shift from an industrial age model of training, which, you know, I'm going to violate that. I only have one slide, and that's kind of it, and it's hard to read, but I'll talk to that in a minute. But the old knife hand, PowerPoint, foot stomp, essentially telling the Marines exactly what they're going to be tested on is not the way, one, that our kids learn in their high schools today, and two, that is the industrial age model that the Commandant referred to, that he wants us to lift and shift to an information age model of learning. And so at AFCEA, we spent the month of August with my S3, and then just real quick, back in the back, I've got Lieutenant Colonel Matt Hall. He's the commanding officer of Air Control Training Squadron, and then Russ Savat is the commanding officer of the Communication Training Battalion. Those are the two commands that we have physically with us at AFCEA, and then we own DLI up at Monterey, but they're kind of on a different trajectory relative to how they teach the Marines up there, some of the language things that they learn. But for those locally, we spent the month of August conducting an OPT. And essentially what I'm going to tell you today is a little bit about that OPT. And then I see some folks wearing civilian clothes. I wish more folks in civilian clothes were here, because at the end, you're going to get a request from me. If you're a member of academia or industry, you're exactly who we need to partner and team with in order to achieve what I think we're on the right path relative to getting after an information age model of training our Marines. And so Matt and Russ, they own the tactical problem at AFCEA relative to modernizing the way that we instruct. And so I would ask, when I get done here today, if you've got skin in this game, don't leave without talking to those two gentlemen. And they brought their SMEs that are kind of actually doing the do relative to our transition. And so we're in 29 Palms, which is kind of probably not physically the best place for Marine Corps Communication Electronics School to be. What we don't have locally is we don't have academia, we don't have industry, we don't have some of the tech-specific nonprofit organizations. But I can promise you this, if you're willing to partner with us and you're willing to come out to 29 Palms, I can smoke a mean brisket and a mean pork butt So I'll at least give you a good supper, and then maybe we can do business over the dinner table. So we started our OPT off informed by the Commonwealth's planning guidance, but what was absent in there was really a very specific definition of what an information age model of training would look like. And so we defined that. I know it's hard to read, but McSess has a booth just on the other side of the ISBIT. And this is kind of a two-pager that we came up with. And this is a letter from me to industry or academia, kind of outlining at the macro level what we'd like from you to partner with us. And we're very transparent relative to the lack of fiscal resources. But I would submit that the first industry partner or the first academia partner to the table with something that we can demonstrate locally and then scale, you've got a pretty large bite at the apple relative to TCOM, because we're all chasing the same thing. So we started off by defining an information age model of learning, and then we just kind of took an assessment of where we were locally and how we provided instruction to Marines. And so in order to get after this information age, we're changing the manner in which our instructors are trained. And so through some instructor innovation workshops, we're getting instructors off of the walking the T. We have, within our own resources as best we can, we have changed the aesthetics of our classrooms, and we've created pods in the classrooms. The instructor is typically at the center. And what we have found is that most of our younger Marines, they kind of work this way in school, and it's student-centered or learner-centric kind of blended seminars, and our Marines are essentially teaching themselves. We've got the authority from General Mullen to innovate within our own resources, and so if we want to do something different, we can. I just can't ask for anything in addition to what we already get from an annual O&M perspective. And so maximizing MarineNet, which provides CDET, which is a Moodle-based learning management system, and we're in the process of basically shifting all of our programs or period of instruction, making them interactive, Moodle-based, and shifting them. Cloud is relative, but for me, getting these POIs off of being locally hosted and moved up to CDET. And so any Marine with a MarineNet account that wants to access any of the things that we're beginning to post now in the Moodle portion of MarineNet will have an ability to do that. And so that enables a few things. One, it enables me to kind of reduce some of my cybersecurity threat locally and get rid of the training network that we maintain. Two, it gets after another thing that Commandant wanted, and that's the ability for Marines to have enabled lifelong learning. And so for you uniform folks, you see the trajectory of our Marines will come in, they get fundamentally trained, they go to the fleet, and at some point, Sergeant Staff Sergeant, they get screened or HISted for some kind of an SDA. And so part of what MarineNet and Moodle allows us to do is give that Marine, again, it's to their own initiative, but gives them the ability when they're coming back into the technical MOSs of communications, they'll have the ability to log in there and at least walk themselves through the supervisor's course or the next chief's course that they may need to attend. And then attracting the right instructor is also key for us, and we're working, pretty diligently with Headquarters of Marine Corps relative to how we screen our instructors. And so, I'm not going to quite eat up 30 minutes, but at the end of the day, what I'm asking for from academia is, or from any of our industry partners, if you're here, where we lack is a pretty detailed organic capability to gamify, make our courses of instruction more interactive and those types of things. So that's what we're looking for. Again, pretty transparent relative to what we have to offer from a fiscal perspective, but I would submit again, as I said a few minutes ago, you bring something to the table that can be scaled. You've got 19 formal learning centers, at least within Training Command, that are all rowing pretty hard. I would submit that McSess is probably one of your better partners. The 06XX MOS is the second largest OC field in the Marine Corps. We run about 17,500 Marines a year through McSess, about 11,000 locally, and then with each one of the MEFs, we have co-located a communication training center and we put about 5,000 to 6,000 Marines a year through there for some continuing training opportunities. So I hope that makes sense for those of you that are here from industry or academia. And I'll leave it there. If anybody has any questions for me or anything else that we're doing, happy to answer those questions. Otherwise, I'd look for hopefully some post-meeting discussions between me, Lieutenant Colonel Savant, Lieutenant Colonel Hall, and just look for an opportunity to plug you in to help us out.
Hey, Sir, Scott Kinner from McTaug. So not industry, not academia, although I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. Quick question, sir. Did you all participated in the TCOM OPT in the fall, correct? So when you're looking at, I'm asking this because it's going to lead to a sidebar, but the TCOM build out over the next POM cycle is supposed to be bringing more resources to you. So I know you said a couple times that you were organically constrained to what you have now, but do you see that environment changing? And if it does, is that going to lead you to a place where you could get rid of your division and MEF training centers because you can do point of impact, augmented reality kind of training right in a comm shop somewhere? You don't need to go back to the home base or to some centralized facility.
So two things there. One, when I spoke to constraints, our constraint right now is really a capabilities-based constraint relative to, I'm depending on the same staff NCOs and chief warrant officers that are providing the instruction to kind of modernize my programs of my programs of instruction and getting those things interactive, gamified, the things that I think our entry-level Marines, that's how they learn today in their high schools. But to your point about the OPT and additional resources, so we are getting after that to some degree in that, and I'll take our MCPIC, our MACTF Comm Planners course, which targets our senior staff NCOs, chief warrant officers up to major, and that's kind of, you may have heard it, the old advanced comm course. And so through Moodle, we have now basically cut the resident portion of that course in half. So there's a non-resident Moodle-based requirement. So they nominate and enroll through their MEFs. They take the non-resident portion. And so it makes it a little more affordable, if you will, for the MEF to let those Marines come back to the mothership to get that detailed training. I don't think we could ever supplant, though, the necessity of the CTC because it does more than fundamentals training. It does a lot of continuing training, supervisor courses. We have contracted instructors there that enable our Marines to achieve the certifications that they need in order to eventually gain, the administrative rights on the network, meeting that 8570 requirement. And then the CTCs are generally flexible in that if a MU or some organization that has an imminent deployment identifies some critical time-sensitive need, they can spin up some additional courses at the request of a unit. So I don't think we'd ever supplant that, but I hope that answers your question. Okay.
Far be it for me not to ask a question, but please, I think you need to share a little bit more about the transition that the school has gone through to get to where it was. I'll give you just a starter. It was around 1996 when the computer sciences school was shifted out to 29 Palms, and then the officers came out to 29 Palms just a few years ago from Quantico. And I think what Colonel Lane was attempting to say, or maybe would like to expand on, is the growth of the school, the growth of the importance of the school, the size and scope of the occupational training that's going on there is really something that I don't think many people in the Marine Corps or anywhere else understands the complexity of that. Why don't you dig down a little bit deeper on that?
So, from the former CEO of McSess, who probably started some of those discussions. So essentially, what Colonel Warwick's referring to is around 2013, the Air Control Training Squadron came into being as a slated Lieutenant Colonel Command. And through that organization, we train essentially all of the aviation command and control Marines. So your 5900s, your 7200s, and then all of the 2800 communication electronic Marines are trained through AFCEA. About a year and a half later, the Communications Training Battalion came into being as a slated Lieutenant Colonel Command, and at the same time, we shifted the Comm Officer course from Quantico out to 29 Palms. And so, again, it's hard to kind of put in perspective unless you come take a look, and walk the dirt with us. But essentially, we own about 2 city blocks at 29 Palms, a couple of classroom rows. If you come through, you'll see a couple of radar domes where the AFCEA guys have some of their radar equipment. But again, the numbers are what they are. Again, 17,500 Marines a year come through McSess, and as the second largest occupational field, there's nothing that anybody sitting in this audience that's wearing a uniform, you don't do anything without a command and control Marine of some sort. I don't know if that gets at your question, sir, but that's, all your network administrators, all of your data systems administrators, all of your transmissions Marines, radio, satellite, the ability to maintain those systems, and then again on the air command and control side of the house, essentially the eyeballs of the MEF commander through our MAX organizations, their radar capability. We've got the kind of nascent MADIS capability that's soon to be fielded to AFCEA that'll replace or at least supplement what our LAD organizations do from a ground-based air defense perspective. I think that about covers, and then all of the enabling requirements for those things that we have there locally as well. Okay.
I'll talk loud. Do you partner with other services, access with other service costs? What does that look like?
Yeah, so we don't directly. One of the things that through the Common Training Battalion, we're probably in the last 4 months, I would say, started to get after. Another point of the Commandant's planning guidance was, a focus on naval integration. And so McTissa at Camp Pendleton has a mock LFOC, Landing Force Operations Center, and we've now begun to integrate the LFOC and that capability into some of our more graduate level opportunities where we'll split the basic comm officer course in half, and for their final FECs, they've got to go, half of them has to develop out the landing force communications requirements in that LFOC, and then connect a ground-based node that we keep the other half of the class is 19 Palms. Beginning to have discussions with the Navy to figure out how do we start an instructor exchange program, bringing in maybe some of their chief petty officers, or we send a gunny or two, again, trying to get at that naval integration piece. We've started some discussions. When I first got there, we went down and spent a day at Fort Gordon with Joel Eubank and his crew at the Signal School because we have some requirements in Hawaii where we don't have a CTC. And so we're looking for an ability to take advantage of the CTC light capability that the Army has and that General Eubank manages. But that's a developing conversation. And then we spent a day in Biloxi with the Air Force, kind of looking at how they provide some very similar network-based instructions that we do. And to your point, we've adopted some of their models. So Scale Up is one. If you Google, it's a pretty it's a good modality to teach information age-based learning to students. But again, it goes back to how the instructors instruct, how classrooms are constructed, information age training aids. And so those are some things that we can do locally, but those are lessons learned that we've taken from both the Army and the Air Force. And again, trying to get after some type of an exchange program with the Navy, but that's a pretty new conversation for us. And I would submit that, again, with McSess being at 29 Palms, it's not the right place to be. Getting some attention from some of our more senior leaders, looking at some possibilities to move McSess. There may be some opportunities at Fort Gordon. We train all of our 1700s there now. All of our satellite operators, when they leave McSess as a fundamentally trained radio operator, they go to Fort Gordon for their satellite training. And then part of our 2800 community goes down to Fort Gordon as well. But also trying to look at maybe some other geographic locations that put us in a better place to take advantage of some community college opportunities. I know that McKiss or Intel School, given their co-location in Northern Virginia, they're beginning to take advantage of some opportunities there with some academia. But if a Marine knows, well, most of y'all know 29 Palms is what it is. Over Mojave, there's not a lot of that there for us to take advantage of. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Colonel, thank you for your time. Dale Hertigan, MITRE. Can you you've touched a little bit on how the EABO and Loki have impacted what you're doing, some of your naval integration. Can you expand on what you're specifically teaching for distributed
Sure.
lethality and survivability?
Absolutely. So 2 points there. One, I think if you had come to McSess about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, just the lexicon of naval integration wasn't there. And so we're beginning at least to introduce some of the terminology back to our Marines, some of the naval tradition type terminologies. But your point about EABO, so what you're going to get out of McSess, and I, Sergeant Major, and I speak to every Marine that comes through McSess, and I tell them generally the same thing. I have absolutely no concern that they're going to leave McSess a fundamentally value-added trained Marine to the first organization they show up to in the Fleet Marine Force. So our focus is on those fundamentals and their ability to, they understand what networking is, they understand what routing is, they understand what data systems administration is, and then quite frankly, it goes then to whomever they're going to. So if I'm the MUCOMO, I just want those new Marines showing up to the fleet to be able to execute the plan that is deliberately developed for whatever the tactical situation or operational situation that they may find themselves in. But I would submit that going forward, we have to have a smarter, more capable Marine, and I think we get after some of that with every 06 Marine that comes through CTB has to go through BCC, the Basic Communication Course. So it's kind of a leveling course where they get a bit of radio, they get a bit of networking, they get a bit of data systems administration, and then they part off into their specific MOS track. But the BCC is a 10-day period of instruction that we run. We only have so much time in the T2P2 process, but at least it gives them kind of a level set, generalist point of view from a command and control perspective. But I think, again, our focus, once they get to their niche part of their MOS training, that they're able to execute whatever the detailed plan that fits the situation that they're going to have to execute.
Sure, I can expand more on that. So all of our effects, we've changed to BOT scenarios. We put them through Loki, put them through EABO. So majority of that you're going to see in what Colonel Lane explained as MICPIC. So your advanced comm planners. And so we bring in people from EWTG, C4 Float, and other people, and they put them through these low-key exercises, and they actually plan distributed comms. And it's all Pacific and scenario-based. But you're going to find most of that is in BCOC and MICPIC. You know, to Colonel Lane's point, not so much in the enlisted courses.
I'm good. Okay, thanks for your time. Again, Matt, please put your paw in the air. So Matt Hall, ACTS, and then Russ Savant, CTB. If you think you've got something to offer relative to enabling our ability to modernize our courseware, that's essentially what we're looking for. I've got great instructors. I've got great Marines. They can teach it. And quite frankly, within our own capabilities, they are churning some interactive, gamified, periods of instruction. But I would submit that organically, that's probably where we lack the most. And so an opportunity to host you at my location, show you very specifically what we want from you and what we can get out of you. And then I will help tell your story as you help enable my ability to provide a better, fundamentally trained Marine to the fleet. So appreciate the time.
Okay, that's fantastic. We're really fortunate to have our next speaker in a few minutes that's going to take the training side of it and turn it into the operational side. We're going to have the CG of 1st Marine Division will be our next speaker, and he'll kick off right at 1100. So come back and see that. And for those that are involved in information warfare, remember where it started. It started with communications or the signal. And the signals are still there, so we got to make sure that they're protected from the start. Okay, thanks for attending.